This is Erin Merelli of Death Ed with Erin, and she is the death doula that trained me. I've taken, including the self-paced, I've probably taken like 6 of her courses over my death doula career, and all of them worth it. She is incredibly knowledgeable. But I've invited her here today so that we could talk about the disposition of bodies and the ecological disposition of bodies. So I think on one of those first few days, we talked about it, and I said, don't worry, y'all, we'll talk about it later. And while I am knowledgeable in some aspects, Erin is a subject matter expert. So, Erin, first tell everybody a little bit about yourself. What you got going on?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Kima's friends and fans. I am a death educator, as she said, and we can talk about such a wide array of things on this topic, as y'all have been doing every day with Kima. Green burial isn't what brought me to death and dying. Like so many people, grief is what brought me to death and dying. But once I had kind of, done a lot of grieving and read a lot of poetry and gotten into that side, I thought, wow, there is so much else to learn about this space. And I became so passionate once it clicked for me what the green burial really meant. Because ultimately, skipping all the way to the end, and then we'll get there slowly, but it's just about returning our body to the earth at the end, right? It's just about giving back what's on loan. And that feels like, oh, obviously, but it's not the practice, and it hasn't been the practice for such a long time. And the implications of that, I think, hurt us and hurt the earth.
Agree wholeheartedly. I had always thought about it. I've always had a problem with conventional burial, even as a child, but I didn't know why. And I think it was just something innate screaming that this is not good. Like this is not good. We take so much from the earth, the water we eat, we drink, the food that we eat, and all of the space that we occupy in all of our years here. The least we could do is give our bodies back. And we know what decomp does for the earth, and we are robbing her of that.
Yeah. I like to say after decay comes renewal. We think that the decay of something is the end of something, but that's not biologically true, right? It becomes food, it becomes fuel if we allow it to become the next generation. And because death and burial is so industrialized and kind of bastardized in its sacredness and the way that it's performed mainstream and commercially throughout the West, that's lost, right? We're taking all of these interventions to both slow decomposition down, which is a conversation we can have, like psychologically, why are we doing that? And how does that affect grief? But also to cost grievers money at every turn with all of these options that are not necessary and that are removing us from the grieving process, right? If we look back in history, we know that this isn't how it's always been. We know that this was a part of the Industrial Revolution, and the rise of it was concurrent to the rise of hospitals and hospices and just outsourcing the care of our elderly and our sick and our dying. And before that, it wasn't like that. We were burying in our backyards. We were burying under our homes. We were burying in our small community, church graveyards or community graveyards, and returning our bodies to the earth. And we still say ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Like, how many movies do you hear that in, right? And so I think that the human psyche accepts that that's what happens, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, but few people want to learn about this, like the nitty gritty of what does happen. And it's not that. When we embalm a body, we put a body in a hard lacquered or metal casket. We put them 6 feet down. We entomb them sometimes in a vault. We're taking all these steps to prohibit the decomposition and to prohibit the return to the earth, and to prohibit the family's control over the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess where would I like to start? Well, so guys, we're gonna get this discussion. We'll start talking about the burial options that you do know, that you probably are very familiar with, and then we'll move into other ones, and we can look at where they come from historically. But if you guys have any questions, please just drop them in the chat. and I will get to them as much as I can. All right. So conventional burial and fire cremation. Those are the options that most people think they have.
Yeah.
And they couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah.
So let's start with, I don't know if you have an order that you like to go, or do you start with your favorite and go down the line?
There's not a right way or a wrong way, but historically we would start with, natural burial, and then that became what we would call conventional or commercial burial. And then fire cremation wasn't popular until about the 1970s. So that came along a little bit later. And then, now moving into the green options, which it's just a cycle because the green options are just aspiring to get back to where it was before it was industrial.
Yes. And so you already mentioned that in conventional or industrial burial is 6 feet deep, sometimes with lacquered boxes or metal boxes. And do they also put concrete in the ground?
A lot of the times they do. It's called a vault. And so just to everyone, when Kima says conventional burial, we mean the burial that most of your loved ones would have gotten if they were not cremated, just like what we know as the traditional funeral in the West, right? And so the body's embalmed, which means letting all of the blood out of the body, putting embalming fluid in it. So we're kind of preserving it that way, which is never required by law in any of the 50 states. And then, putting it in a casket that doesn't just break down. In green burial, we can still use caskets, but they're made out of usually like pine, sometimes bamboo or wicker or a soft wood that's going to break down. When we're doing like a hard lacquered casket or a steel casket or a metal casket, it takes so much longer to break down, right? So the body's not returning to the earth. We're just taking all of these layers of prevention. And then, like you said, the 6 foot down is the depth of a root cellar. That's what we put our vegetables in and our canned goods in to make it through the winter. So we know that is intentionally slowing decomposition. And then the concrete is called a vault, which is purely cosmetic. And it's just so that my cat's going to join us. It's just so that the land doesn't sink in, doesn't kind of concave where the hole was dug.
Okay.
So that's conventional burial, and you have to buy the land. In places in Europe, it's more common to lease the land for 20 years, and then after 20 years, you're moved to a community grave with other people. And there's just this idea that like how long after we die should we own a piece of land, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. I feel like someone recently, a girlfriend of mine, she lives here in Costa Rica with me, but she talked about that. She was just like, some of the vaults here, they will put family members in where there had already been. So say, your great-great-grandfather passed and now he's fully decomposed. The next person can go in that same spot without them having to purchase more.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. Because really, to go to the grave, I've been to cemeteries and you see 1812.
Yeah,
right? 1812. Like, there's no one alive that is mourning this person anymore.
Exactly. So, I love a cemetery. When I kind of talk smack about it, I don't mean to discredit the beauty of it. I think that they are monuments of love in so many cases, and they can be very beautiful and romantic even. I love them. But if you were to peel back that top layer of the cemetery and see what's going on, it's like a mouthful of cavities. It's just one cavity after the next that is preventing ashes to ashes, dust to dust from actually happening. And why? What a waste when we could return our bodies to the earth in ways that heal the soil and grow things.
Yeah. Do you have a theory or an actual explanation as to why we go through the trouble to preserve these bodies?
It comes from a few different places. The 6 foot deep part is just antiquated. It's from grave diggers in Europe in the Middle Ages, which isn't really a common problem that we're dealing with, but it's never changed. Sometimes things used to make sense and They don't anymore, but never has the status quo been challenged enough to change it. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. But preservation generally in America happened during the Civil War. Most people were just buried in a green way, in a natural way. You know, the carpenter in town built a casket and they were buried in the cemetery, or maybe even shrouded up until the Civil War. And then so many soldiers were dying en masse far away from home, and they couldn't get them home quickly, right? They didn't have refrigerated trucks like we would use now, or cargo like planes like we would use now. So they embalmed them because it could be weeks or months before they could be returned to their hometowns. And again, it just never stopped once it started, because there's money in it, right? Because now every single family is going to pay an extra $800 to $1,100 for embalming, because that's just what we do, and we don't know that we can ask questions about it.
Yeah. And am I right in assuming, or am I remembering correctly, that Abraham Lincoln was one of the reasons that it went mainstream, because they took his body on a tour across America?
They did. On a train tour. Yeah, he was one of the first, he was embalmed. Before that, there was embalming. I mean, there's been all different types of preservation throughout history, but it wasn't commonplace. It was like royalty or scientific exploration. So it was the Civil War and the president's post-mortem embalming tour that shortly thereafter, then we started having colleges for embalming, and, embalming as a standard practice. And along the way, it getting mixed up with this message of cleanliness, that you have to be embalmed to see the body, or that it's not clean otherwise. And I just want to dispel that, because it's really not true. Even think of it this way. Let's say, first of all, very, very few diseases are communicative post-mortem. So we're really not concerned about it hardly ever. But let's just say there was one. Would it be safer to keep that in the body contained, or would it be safer to open it up and let the blood out and expose it, right? So just even the foundational argument of embalming being safer doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And most funeral homes will also have refrigeration. So if there is a situation where they have to keep a body cool for a week or whatever it is until the burial, they can do that instead. So there's not a real threat of decomposition happening in the rancid, gross way, unless there's no climate control and there's, not even ice packs.
Yeah. Okay. So then natural burial is what we used to do. And that is within the top 3 feet, yes?
Yeah, natural burial and green burial are almost interchangeable, but natural burial is like really nothing unnatural about it. We're not taking any steps to stop decomposition. And 18 feet or 18 inches to about 3 feet, depending on the soil and the climate, is best for decomposition. And as long as it's below 18 inches, theoretically, it's below the scent barrier for animals to smell.
Yeah. Recently, I had to help my best friend bury her 2 puppies, dogs, and realized that I was the subject matter expert on how to dig this grave. I'm like,
Yes.
well, I know we want, and those were the 2 things I was concerned about. We don't want to go too deep because we want to encourage decomp, and then we don't want to go too shallow because we live in Costa Rica. There are wild animals, and so was grateful for that knowledge. And then after green burial and natural burial, my favorite next one, which I hope to be able to choose this as an option. I know you and I have spoken about me doing work here to get some policy created around this in Costa Rica, but natural organic reduction, I feel like, is one of my favorites. Is it the least amount of carbon?
It's even better than that. It sequesters carbon. So we can kind of measure, the imprint of each burial method in terms of CO2. And all of them take a little bit because, even to dig a grave, you're going to use fuel, or, if you're going to use water cremation, there's electricity involved. So they all use a little bit, except for natural organic reduction. So for those of you who are like, that's a mouthful of what? It's, do you want to tell them what it is? Can you tell what it is?
It is composting, basically.
Yeah.
So you hear people talk about, I want to become a tree, I want to become whatever. Natural organic reduction is one way that you can do that, because you become this super nutrient dense soil at
Yeah.
the end of the decomposition. And I think to do it completely natural without any carbon, it takes about 9 months, right?
There's a couple of different methods
Okay.
that you can do it. One where they're just adding a little bit of oxygen. Sometimes they're adding some mushroom spores even. They're starting to play with ways that just, I guess I would say, like, augment or perfect natural conditions. So they're still not doing anything. They're certainly not doing anything to stop decomposition, but they're creating prime conditions. And in that case, it can happen, pretty quickly, even as quickly as like 6 to 8 weeks. But if you don't do anything at all and you just let nature completely take its own course, it takes about 9 months. And I went to a conference on natural organic reduction, and one of the stories that was so touching was about a woman who had lost her son and chose this method and chose the long 9-month process, and brought a chair and went and sat right next to the vessel that his body was slowly turning into soil in every day, or most of the days, for these 9 months, and just said, it took me 9 months to grow him, and it's going to take him 9 months to return to the earth, and I'm going to be here for that. And that's such an active way to process your grief, right? Like, grief wants something to do. Grief is like, what do? I need to do something, and nothing satiates the need that it has. But I can't think of anything more dedicated and profound to do with your grief than something like that, right? And then once the person has transformed into this soil, like you said, it's really healthy soil. It's nutrient rich. Funeral homes are partnering with land partners who have, land that's been overgrazed, or land where there has been fracking, or even land where they're doing farming that's like for non-edibles, because there is some controversy about that. And it's so good for the earth. Things grow so much better. And when we measure the soil, the CO2 in the soil, we're sequestering it. For another way of looking at it is that for every 2 fire cremations, the emissions that are put into the air from those fire cremations, 1 natural organic reduction would offset 2. So I don't know that we know of a better way to feed the earth than to simply give our bodies back at the end. And I think she's pretty hungry. I think she's pretty mad.
Yeah. I also, going back to the longest one taking 9 months, there's something kind of poetic about that. There's, just, it takes you, when you are pregnant, it takes you about that long to try to wrap your mind around the idea that you're about to have another living being with you. And so the idea to channel your grief into 9 months of sending them back is really poetic, and probably does wonders for grief. For those of you just now joining, we are talking about green disposition options for burial, and these are options outside of conventional burial, which is 6 feet deep in lacquered boxes, and fire cremation. So you mentioned, we've already talked about, or composting, and the other one that you mentioned was water cremation, which is super, super interesting, but a little bit more costly to get started.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
This one is my favorite, and we joke, maybe it's inappropriate, but you have to have some dark humor in this industry, that it's like one last day at the spa, because it is your body breaking down through the element of warm water rather than through the element of fire, right? Flame cremation, by contrast, when everybody talks about cremation, that's your body going into essentially an oven. It's made out of bricks. It's called a retort, with a fuel source, usually natural gas. The larger the body, the more natural gas. 2 sources of ignition, top and bottom, burning the body. It's hard to think about, because it's just hard to think about, right? So I am soothed, and I'm a double Pisces, maybe that's partially why, by the idea of like slowly dissolving into water instead. So with water cremation, the body is put into a vessel with warm water. It's not hot, boiling, it's just warm. And it's about 95% water to 5% alkali, potassium hydroxide, I believe, which is common in soaps, over-the-counter stuff. You probably have used it before in the products that you used to make in your past life. And over time, it's corrosive. So there are, again, different models of this machine that take slightly different lengths, but between about 6 and 16 hours, depending on the model, the body will just be in this vessel with the warm water and the alkali, and it just kind of gently rocks back and forth. There's something about it that's almost like womb-like. It's just this warm rocking. And what's going on inside the vessel is that your soft tissues, your skin, your organs, your muscles, your fat are coming off the bone and mixing in with the water. And when that process is finished, the water's stored in a tank and just the skeletal remains are still there. They're very soft because they've been in water for so long. So when you go to pick them up, they actually kind of crumble. Those are returned to the family just like ashes would be, and they are ground up. So it's a white powder, it looks like powdered sugar. And the family gets that back the same way they would get ashes. So they can put it in an urn or in cremation jewelry, or, there's those parting stones where they press it into stones. I have vials of my sister. I'm going to take you guys with me, and actually I'll just show you what it looks like. I joke that I need to make a video about this because it looks like drugs. Tell me, it does. It does. Tell me what this looks like.
It does look like drugs.
Yeah. These are my sister's bones. And so you can see how it would be equivalent to families getting bones back from fire cremation. And then that liquid we can also get. This is my sister's liquid. It's even got her name and her date of death. And I have been growing gardens with it since she died. A lot of her body went to a peony farm, and we turned her into peonies. So now she gets to be at weddings, and I get to go every year and pick peony bouquets and bring her home. And so it's an alternative, right? You could go to a cemetery and sit in front of the graveyard, or you can do water cremation or natural organic reduction, where I don't know if I like the word reducing, but reducing our bodies to their elemental roots, peptides, sugars, salts, amino acids, and those can be used to nurture and grow new life. And that's ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
Yeah, for sure. So that, like, if I can't be composted, water cremation would be my next option. Well, I don't know, because I love the idea of burial at sea.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, and I am a Pisces, and I am soothed by water. But I like the idea of burial at sea. And so burial at sea, everyone, your family will take your body on a boat, and you have to go out. How far out do you have to be?
In most places, it's 2 nautical miles.
Okay.
I was talking to someone a few days ago who is in the Gulf of Mexico, which we're going to continue to call it. And saying that it's much harder there because you have to go way, way out past like the shelf. So I would imagine that geography affects that sometimes, but 2 nautical miles is on average the rule.
Yep. And then they drop you into the ocean.
Yeah.
And so that one also, I like the idea of that one. And then there are some traditional, I guess, if you will, that we don't really use anymore, like sky burial.
Yeah.
It is not done anymore. And sky burial, and for those of you that are wondering, because we can't send people into the sky, it's a scaffold, if you will. And your body is placed on the scaffold, and the birds and like the what are they called?
The vultures.
Yeah, vultures. But
yeah.
I thought there was a certain kind of word for them. Like, are they scavenger birds?
Oh, scavengers. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The scavengers will help to basically debone the body. And so, but that's still another way of going back to the earth. Like, you kind of complete the circle of life with the sky burial.
Right. To be eaten. Not a one of us gets out of here without eating a lot of stuff, So as crazy as it sounds to us, it's just our programming of what we think is normal. When you take it out of that context, it makes sense.
Yes. And all of them, honestly, all of the disposition options that are good for the earth seem to complete the cycle.
Yeah.
Except for, I mean, I guess fire cremation completes the cycle if your ashes are scattered somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But it also takes a lot of energy to.
It takes a lot of energy, and the process of burning it kind of takes away all of the nutritional value, right? With the other processes, we're keeping that alive enough to be reused.
Yes.
And flame cremation burns everything and is also very acidic. So those of you who are burying your ashes with, like your flame cremation ashes with your roses or whatever, you really need to spread them out. Don't do a serious concentration because it could hurt them. I am not an expert on this, but there are supplements that you can get that kind of like offset the acidity so that you can bury them alongside it. But typically it's bad instead of good when we put it in the ground.
Okay, good to know. Did we forget any?
Those are the big ones. I mean, there's some fringe ones we're learning about, like the mushroom suit.
Yes, the mushroom
that
suit
one's
is
cool.
interesting. Yes, so and how intelligent mushrooms are. Like, you know, they say that the whole world is connected by mushrooms and trees, the roots and all that communicate because of fungus and so the idea that you could become a mushroom and really just I don't know.
I love it. I mean, yeah, I love it. It feels like the mushroom would have the intelligence to like deliver your nutrition exactly where it's needed in your environment. I love that. Tap into our mycelium network at the very end. Yeah, that one's trickier logistically. It has to be done essentially on private property because you can't bury it, right? If you bury somebody in a mushroom suit, you're taking away all the oxygen that it needs to grow. Mushrooms have to be kind of on the surface. So Luke, is it Luke Perry from 90210? It's a few years old now, but when he died, he had private land and they put him in a mushroom suit on his own private land because you just have to be right there on the top of the forest floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it legal everywhere?
If you have private land.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know, y'all. So for those of you guys still in the United States, you could become a mushroom if you have private land.
In most cases, it's 2 acres or more that you have to have. Like you would struggle to do it in a subdivision. Right. And on the death certificate, you just list the latitude and longitude coordinates as the burial location.
Okay. And I guess that helps for future crimes. Having to document to make sure, if they find it in 50 years. Okay. So do you guys have any questions? Like, y'all are quiet today. Normally y'all have a lot of questions. We could be freaking you all the way out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We did dive right into some graphic stuff.
It's such a normal conversation for both Erin and I. I think sometimes we forget that everyone else is not about that life. So do you guys have questions about alternative burial options or alternative disposition options? Because they're not all burial. Only like the green burial is burial. Shanielle Hank says, this was very informative. Thank you. You're welcome, Shanielle. And that's what we want. We just want to inform you guys because a lot of times people don't have all the options and go into debt trying to give their loved one what capitalism has told them that they deserve in death. And really
exploitive.
It's very exploitive. And it's not even about what the deceased person wants because they're gone. It's really about what does the earth need? What does the earth deserve? And the earth deserves these nutrients back. The nutrients, say we're living 70, 80, 90 years, we should be giving back as much as we took. And I believe that's why when humans decompose, it's so nutrient dense. You have such rich black soil because we've taken a lot. And so I'm hoping that this becomes more mainstream. These other options become more mainstream in our lifetime, right? And so if you guys, so Shanielle says, so with the water cremation, you get back both ashes and a water solution. Yes.
You do. Yeah, the ashes, it's about the same amount you would get with the flame cremation. The water yield is pretty large, though, because when they put the body in the vessel, they add about 90 gallons of water, approximately. So the weight of the body plus 90 gallons of water is essentially the volume that you'll be getting back. And that's more than most, minus the skeleton. So maybe half the body weight. So most people don't want that much, even with my sister. So I took about 8 of those bottles that I showed you, and I'm on my last one now. She's been gone for 4.5 years. And then you can choose what land partner you want the rest of it to go to. Funeral homes have set land partners, and one that I think is really cool here in Colorado, it's a newer one, is called the Wild Animal Sanctuary, and they rescue lions and tigers and bears. Like they rescued the Tiger King's tigers and animals that have been misused in circuses and stuff like that. Go there, and people can volunteer to have their water released there on those fields to grow the grass that the lions and the tigers and the bears eat. And it's not for everybody, but I think it's a cool option.
Yeah. So with the liquid, Erin, do you dilute it before you use it on your plants and things?
Yes, you do dilute it quite a bit. I have just like a little spray bottle that I'll put about 1/10 of the liquid in and fill the rest up with water.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's why, because also you said 8 bottles of that size, but it's lasted you 4 years, so it must be super concentrated.
It's very, very concentrated.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about. Something has to happen to our bodies when we go. Something must, right? So what do we want it to be? And giving that choice back. I think a lot of times when people are in grief, we feel like we don't have any choices. We feel like we've been stripped of all of our choices. And so in death, once you learn about it, do you agree? Would you say there are surprisingly more choices than you would have originally thought?
Oh, absolutely. Burial is just not even an option for me at this point. And because I don't want to take up land, I don't want to take up space, but I would love to go back to nurture land and new growth and new life. And so in whatever way that's possible. So Shanielle, I hope that answered your question. The other question I had was, you had bones, a wind chime made. Was that made with some of the powder?
Yeah, it is. Do you want me to show you? Let me grab it.
I'd love to.
It's right here.
Yes.
Okay, one moment.
So she's going to get the wind chime. Her sister had told her when she became a death doula that she wanted her to make a wind chime out of her bones. Now, in the United States, it is illegal to have full human remains, right? So they can never give you back the actual bones. It always has to be ground down and you give in powder. So she molded them into the wind chime. And I just thought that was super cool.
Yeah, people want bones back all the time, and I understand why. It's cool, but for forensic reasons, we're not supposed to get the bones back. And my sister had been in the woods hiking and found these deer bones, and she had colored them blue, and she was an artist. She made all kinds of weird stuff, and she was doing my hair one day after, like at the same time that she was making these bones, and she's like, "When I die, Erin, turn me into a blue wind chime." And so here we are. So here we are. Can you guys see this? Hold on.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, this is my sister's bones powdered down and formed into molds to create this skeleton.
Are you gonna hang it up?
Yes, I know that I need to. I feel bad that I haven't yet, but I don't know how to safely do it. I don't know if I want to admit this, but I'm going to since we're here. My sister died by hanging, and so I have a weird feeling about hanging it up, is the truth.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the wind chime.
It's great craftsmanship. I don't know who you sent that to, but...
Her name is Kelly. If it's okay, we can put her in the comments afterwards so people can find her if they want to. She does... all kinds of art, but she said after doing this, it just felt so much more meaningful than a lot of her art does, and so I think she's moving in a memorial direction, right? So the idea around green burial is just not to tell people there's a right way or a wrong way, but just that there are so many ways. Who would have thought I could turn my sister into a wind chime and flowers, but that's what we've turned her into, and that helps us as grievers, and it's a cool legacy to give to them, and,
Yeah, so guys, in the comments, those of you that are still here, that you stuck it out over
It's a long one.
this seemingly weird conversation, of the options that we gave you. So the natural burial, the green burial, water cremation, composting, or burial at sea, which one sounds like something that you would be interested in for yourself? Because of course we can't always make these decisions for the people in our lives, but if you had the option, would you still opt for fire cremation or burial? Because I know sometimes there could be religious reasons behind it, but yeah, I'm interested to know what sounds good to you. And you can answer now, or you can answer. I'm going to post this video so that it can live in perpetuity. Shanielle says natural organic reduction or water cremation. Yep, those are my favorite as well. And it gives your family, like Erin has had 4 years of watering plants and all of these things with her sister. I wish I'd have had that option, or I'd known about the option when my sister passed, because I definitely would have. I mean, I wasn't there because I was stuck here. It was during COVID, but I would have encouraged my mom to consider one of these options instead.
And that's the thing, what you just said. Like, I wish I would have known back then. I hear that all the time in the green burial conversation, but also in all areas of death doula conversations, right? So that's why we keep getting on here and talking about it. We want people to know before it's past the point where they have the choice.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining me
Thanks,
today.
Kima. My pleasure.
Your expertise. I'll probably have you on again. And also, I want to say really quick, you said that after the girl did your sister's bones, she's moving in a more way. Isn't it kind of funny? The people that we touched, there are other people in my life that are moving towards memorial work after having experiences with me. And I just think it's so funny. They're like, oh, this is something that we could do.
Yeah. I mean, it's so universal. It touches everything. It intersects with everything. And if we have to work, I think most of us want our work to be meaningful.
Yes. Yep. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And
Thank you.
Soon. Thank you guys so much for staying, those of you that stayed. And I will catch y'all next time. Ciao.